Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Y4Y session on social and emotional learning. The purpose of this presentation is to help you develop and implement social and emotional learning in your program. Before we get into the meat of the matter, let's view and listen to the disclaimer from the Department of Education.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number ED ESE 14D0008 with Synergy Enterprises Incorporated. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, methodology, technique, or enterprise mentioned here is intended or should be inferred.
My name is Andrew Francis, and I'm an education specialist with the Y4Y team. I've been with the team for just under a year now, and I've had the opportunity to work in youth development and also in education for over 10 years. And that includes serving as a out of school time site director. And so I will bring all of that to bear on the session today, in particular also serving in guidance and counseling as a project coordinator for activities geared at improving the social and emotional well-being of students. So our objectives for today are: one, we will define social and emotional learning, and then we'll also spend some time examining techniques and strategies that you can use to build a positive culture and climate for your program. And this will also build on other material and courses that Y4Y has done on creating a positive learning environment in general. We'll also be reviewing relevant Y4Y tools that can assist you in building a positive organizational culture, which is very important and foundational to social and emotional learning within out of school time. So let's talk about the benefits of social and emotional learning. You'll agree with us that our ability to navigate emotions and relationships greatly affect how we learn, but also what we learn. And there is no debate, there can be no question that social and emotional skills are life skills. And so the more we model and teach these skills through social and emotional learning to our students, we are actually laying a foundation for them to be successful in life. And so when staff in out of school time, but also students are able to self-regulate and to manage their emotions and manage their feelings, then we actually work together to create that positive learning environment. And we find, and you'll agree with us, that when we cultivate a positive learning environment, the experiences within that environment contribute to us developing smarter, happier, kinder, and more productive human beings. And so social and emotional learning really underpins the creation of a positive learning environment. And that, I'm sure, is an ideal for all of us, that we are positive in creating and providing learning experiences for our students and their families. And so SEL is at the base and the foundation of that ideal. And so when we talk about SEL, in terms of a definition, we borrow from CASTLE, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, because they have spent extensive time and effort researching, but also collaborating with the leading experts on social and emotional learning. And so for the purposes of today's session, we will use their definition. And so Castle defines social emotional learning as being the process through which children and adults acquire the knowledge, but also effectively apply that knowledge and the attitudes and skills that are necessary to understand and manage their emotions, And as they understand and manage their emotions, they are also able to set and achieve their goals. And also, we mean by that we mean positive goals. They are able to feel and to show empathy for others, so show concern for the emotional changes or social changes that others may be going through. And as a result, they are also in a better position to establish and maintain positive relationships and to also be responsible in making decisions. So with that definition, Y4Y has identified 10 steps for integrating social and emotional learning into a 21st CCLC program, and we'll be walking through those 10 steps today, beginning first with assessing our organization's readiness, building a program team that can help us to, one, conduct our needs assessment, but also to create smart goals that define where we want to go in terms of developing and implementing SEL in our out of school time program. We then look at the logistics that we need to put in place to be successful in implementing that program. And also, how do we set the social and emotional environment to ensure that it is enabling, it is positive, it is encouraging, and it allows for our students to acquire the skills and the competencies that we want them to. And as we set that environment, we also focus on intentionally designing our activities, ensuring that we connect our needs with well-defined need statements. And then we also look at creating smart goals and looking at what methods will we use to deliver those activities that are well-intentioned in helping our students to achieve our goals for them when we're developing SEL skills and competencies is concerned. Of course, you will require high quality staff to do that work. And so we talk about in step 8, recruiting and preparing that staff to deliver those activities. And of course, implementing all of your activities and ensuring that you are taking a continuous improvement process in doing that. We also spend much of our time, or some of our time, we will talk about celebrating your achievements where STL is concerned. Let's begin with step 1, assessing your organization's readiness. Now, assessing organizational readiness is very important because this allows you to assess the strength of your infrastructures. And by that, we mean what are your policies, what are your programs and activities, what are your structures in place that support SCL currently, but also what will you need to adapt or to introduce essentially to get you on the right footing for successful programming. And so a strong infrastructure will provide the foundation that you need to plan your SEL activities, to design them, to implement, but also to assess social and emotional learning within your program. And there are 6 indicators of organizational readiness. We begin, first of all, by talking about the school day and out of school time partnerships in place for SEL. We also focus on, ensuring that there is adequate time, space, and budget to implement social and emotional learning. And that becomes important because as you design your activities, you want to ensure that your activity design supports SEL, not only your SEL related activities, but across your entire program, and your design of your activities is SEL at the heart of that, so that we are integrating those competencies and skills within and across all that we do within our school time program. That, of course, requires that we understand the social and emotional learning needs of our students and their families, and that we also have the policies and procedures in place to guide social and emotional learning. And with all of those structures in place, of course, we will also will need to focus on our 6th indicator, which is do we have competent staff to help us to implement our social and emotional learning activities in our out of school time program. And so, for additional guiding questions on the six indicators and to also keep track of your assessment, you want to use this tool that Y4Y provides. It's the Assessing Social and Emotional Organizational Readiness tool. And so all the indicators I mentioned before are listed on this tool, but also the guiding questions, and you're able to record your responses, but also what resources are available for you to consider as you provide answers to those questions and get a better picture of where you are as an organization as you prepare to implement or to expand social and emotional learning in your program. So once we've done that, we are then in a position to review our existing program team or to build a new team. And so it's important that you make very key decisions when determining who to ask to be members of your program team. And this is important because you want to ensure you're attracting and you're inviting people with certain expertise in areas such as data analysis, activity design, but also people who are enthusiastic about social and emotional learning. You want people who are passionate about this area because they will bring that passion to the fore as you plan and design your activities. And so as you consider expertise in data analysis and also passion and enthusiasm, it's important that you bring together representatives from all the stakeholder groups because this will allow for there to be a variety of views and ideas as you craft and carve out your SEL activities. And so you may want to consider probably your social worker, instructional support staff, special ed teachers, your school nurse, those who are leading Section 504, or even your PBIC, that's your Policy Behavior Intervention Support lead, but also bring in your family members and your community or business leaders because they too have much to contribute. To the process. So all of these persons have had some experience or will have some ideas about how to connect and align your behavior interventions and also to provide opportunities for students to demonstrate social and emotional learning skills, whether in the school environment, within your other school type program, or even within your program community. Now, having established that team, they can also support you with the process of conducting your needs assessment. And this is important because nothing gives you a better picture of where to go, what to do with social and emotional learning than having an idea as to what are the needs of your program and its participants. And so to successfully integrate SEL, you need to start with your data. And this will allow you to identify the needs of your students and families. And it will also help you to better understand the kinds of activities that you need to design in order to fulfill those needs. Once you've identified those needs and you've identified the activities to fulfill those needs, you can also then move on to identifying the resources and assets that will help you to meet those needs. And this diagram really gives you a picture of that. So your data, whether it's state assessment reports, report cards, or student surveys, those will allow you to determine your needs, design your activities intentionally, and also identify your assets and select your partners. Let's spend some time looking more closely at the kinds of data you would need to collect. So in order for you to successfully support each student in their learning and development, we must understand where they are. And that, of course, is why it's important that we collect data and that we do so at different levels. So for Y4Y, we stress the importance of collecting school level or community level data because this will allow you to better understand the community and the school and the needs. So in collecting this data, it will provide you with an overview of, for example, your school student body and their general needs. So some sources may include For example, data on youth behavior and also your climate surveys as well. This will also provide you with insights on risky behaviors, but also resiliency activities that you may want to incorporate or look closely at for your program because of the level of efficacy and how they have worked to improve conditions for youth and for families. When we talk about school level data, we want to spend some time focusing on our report cards or observations, because this is really where we dig deeper into the needs of specific groups of students, whether at the grade level or it could be also by gender, but also specific students as well, and what needs they have in order for them to learn and acquire these skills. And so when you look at your student level data, it will tell you which students are struggling with what particular behaviors or issues or needs, and how you can design your activities to meet and to target those skill areas. Now, student voice data is very important because as we do surveys with our students, our parents, and other our stakeholders, it really allows for us to hear what they want. And then we're able to twin their needs with what they want, because that allows for us to use the students and their families' wants as vehicles to drive our activities and to drive our interventions and to ensure that we help them to learn what they need to learn, but giving them opportunity to participate in what they're also interested in. So those are the three data levels: school and community level, student level, and also student voice as well. So, for example, if you were to look at your school's disciplinary referral, you might see uh, where, for example, at the school level, is a 50% rise in disciplinary referrals during the school day. That's quite generic and at the higher level. So we want to dig deeper into that to look at our student level data. And when we do that, it shows us that individual behavior reports indicate that 40% of students receive disciplinary referrals due to fighting. Uh, of course, we want to hear from students what activities they're interested in, which we could then use to address fighting as a student level need, but also address the larger issue at the school level in terms of an increase in disciplinary referrals. And so when we do that, the students indicate that their interest is in martial arts. So how do we use martial arts to help us to marshal our students in the right direction and to decrease disciplinary referrals due to fights and to decrease disciplinary referrals in general? So we do that, and we also spend some time essentially as we look at that data to identify where students are when it comes on to the five skill domains. Now, these competencies or skill domains have also been explored in detail by Castle, which I mentioned before. And it's important that you understand these competencies because they will essentially help you to better understand and identify the needs of your students, but also how do you prioritize those needs? So which competencies will you need to will you focus on because of what the data is showing you? And so you're then also able to tailor your SEL activities and your processes. And so the five skills which we'll review are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision making, and also relationship skills. So notice that there's self and also social awareness there. So be mindful of those and understand them differently as well. So as we do that, we are then able to move to the next level, which is to create our program goals. And in creating our program goals, we want to be very specific. We want to be measurable. We want to ensure that we're able to measure that. So we want to be very clear and straightforward and to emphasize exactly what we want to happen based on the activities that we've planned. And we want to we also be certain that we're able to measure that which we have outlined as our goals, but to explore, are they achievable or relevant are they, but also to set some timeline as to by what uh, period or date or month or so would we like to achieve a particular target. And you can, of course, explore the Y4Y Goal podcast, which is one of the Tickham goals that we have to get more details on that. But here's an example for you of an attempt at creating a SMART goal. And this goal is that by the end of the program year, disciplinary referrals for students who participate in the 21st CCLC program will decrease by 10% as measured by behavioral reports. And the question is this goal specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it relevant? Is it time bound? And if you may ask yourself, how is it specific? Uh, it's very clear that students, so we're very straightforward who we're targeting and what they will achieve. The students who participate in the 21st CCLT program for at least 60 days. So we have niched out a specific target group there. Is it measurable? Yes, it is, because we will be measuring a decrease in behavioral reports, and we have put a percentage to that. We have said 10% decrease should be realized. Is it achievable? Yes, 10% we believe is achievable within the context of the other variables we've considered for the program. And is it relevant? Yes, because we're going back to targeting disciplinary referrals, which we saw in our school level data, but also in our student level data, where there was an increase in the number of referrals, but also, of course, due to fights. Is it time bound? Yes, it is. We have set a goal for that to be achieved by the end of the program year. So that gives us a good stretch of time to build out our activities and to see incremental achievement of the goal. So the verdict is that this goal is indeed a SMART goal. We move to step 5, and this is where we focus on planning or logistics. And this helps us to make sure that the time, the space, and the materials, but also the budget, money makes the world go round, we're often told. We have all of those in place to implement our plans. And so we want to determine what will be our timeline and our schedule for the program. And that will, of course, include social emotional learning within our daily schedule, our weekly schedule, our monthly schedule. And we want to also consider when we will offer explicit instruction in social emotional learning, but also how will we embed those activities, those skills rather, in other activities. We want to ensure that the space is sufficient for us to start activities. It may mean that we're going to be doing a lot of moving around as much as the conditions now in our country will allow. But even if we are doing it virtually, we see how best students can be in a physical space that facilitates social and emotional learning. We know there may be some limitations, but we work with those limitations as well, or work around them rather. Make sure your supplies are in place, and also that you have looked carefully at your budget for whether you're going to be needing SEL curricula that needs to be purchased. Do you need to engage vendors for that? Do you need to get people in to train your staff? Or do you also need to pay for any transportation costs where that is a requirement for your program? So consider all of those in your process of planning, and to ensure that your logistics do not cause your program for SEL to be not successful. And then we move to step 6, and this is where we talk about setting the social and emotional environment. And I'm sure you're asking, what do you mean by that, and why is this important? And so step 6 is really where you set up your program environment to support social and emotional learning. So it doesn't happen haphazardly. It has to be carefully designed, and you have to be intentional in setting up the environment. And you can do this by, of course, building on existing assets within your program, and also by implementing SEL practices throughout everything you do as a program, and also taking steps to promote student agency and leadership. So how do you engage students and place them at the center of setting up the environment? What do they desire? What are their ideals? And how do they think this can be done? And so there are three main strategies that we recommend. One is to promote positive culture, climate, and relationships, and also to be supportive in building positive relationships with your students, and to also use practices and curricula that are specific to SEL. And so you want to ask yourself some key questions does your organizational culture and climate promote development of social emotional skills? And we looked at this briefly when we looked at the assessing your organizational readiness at the beginning of this presentation. Uh, do the values that your organization have, do they support creating that ideal environment and your plans for implementing SEL? And so you want to work with your school to develop those interventions that are positive as well. And you also want to focus on the positive behaviors rather than the negative. Just give the attention to the positive so that you can help students to overcome and for them to recognize that this is where your focus is and that's where your desire is, but also what your expectations are for them. And of course, you'd want to deliver specific curricula and also practices across the entire program environment. And you want to ensure that your staff are modeling those practices consistently so that students will see and want to adopt those actions, but also to adopt the positive vocabulary as well in all that they do. And there are really three essential frameworks that can be applied to the practices. You could either take a trauma-informed practice approach, or a positive youth development, or a mindfulness development approach. And so these frameworks act like lens that can help you to see a variety of ways to meet your students' needs. And as you can see, whether we're talking about practices, or we're talking about approaches, or we're talking about frameworks, it all boils down to addressing your students' needs and developing their social and emotional skills. Trauma-informed practice in particular, this is where we really reflect an understanding of the impact of trauma on child development and ways in which we can minimize its effects, but also committing as out of school time leaders and staff to avoid causing any additional trauma as well. When we talk about positive youth development, this is where we are supporting positive youth outcomes for young people, and we do that by fostering the 5 C's. And these 5 C's really underlie all the social and emotional learning competencies too, because it talks about competence, it talks about building confidence, building connections between youth and adults, but also youth and their peers, building character, but also building a sense of care for others in our young people as well. And mindfulness are really practice development are really practices that increase a person's ability to focus on the present moment. So a lot is happening, and our young people can become easily distracted. And so we want them to be present in the moment, and as they do that, to not focus on past or future events, and to share the unhelpful thoughts and feelings from them so they don't take them over, but instead to allow them to be able to improve their executive function and skills and to be present in the moment, and for them to monitor and to regulate their focus in the moment. So don't think too much about the past or the future, but think about now and how you can take advantage of what now has to offer to you and to them as young people. And so on the following slides, we're going to be playing this game, and it's called What's the Lens? And in this game, we'll be sharing with you some scenarios or activities, and we'd like for you to decide through which lens were these activities developed. And you can make notes on your paper or whatever way you want to record your responses as you go through this training session. So here's our first scenario. And for this scenario, we want you to tell us which framework. Is it trauma-informed practice? Is it positive youth development? Or is it mindfulness development? Here we go. So Andres notices one student, Jamal, flinches each time the buzzer signals a transition between activities. And Andres tries different signals until he finds that turning the lights off for 3 seconds, then turning it back on seems to work for everyone without startling Jamal. Is this what framework was applied here uh, by Andres? Did he apply trauma-informed practice? Did he apply positive youth development? Did he apply mindfulness development? Go ahead and think through and share with us your thoughts on that. Make a note of which framework you think was applied in that scenario. Yes, you guessed it right. If you said trauma-informed practice, you are indeed correct because Andres was able to reflect on, a previous traumatic experience or previous traumatic experiences that Jamal may have had, and he was able to use that to drive his intervention to try his best not to recreate that experience for Jamal. So you are correct. Let's go to our second activity. And again, it's for you to decide and to select which of the frameworks you think was applied. So Kyle creates caring rituals by greeting every second grader by name and giving a special handshake that the student selected or created. She also encourages students to learn each other's names and handshakes. Of course, in these times with COVID-19, you may have to do a elbow touch or elbow shake or whatever it may be, or even just to acknowledge each other by a bow of the head or whatever other greetings you have found to use at this time. But tell us, based on creating these caring rituals, greeting each student by name and giving them a special, uh, you know, uh, you know, uh, acknowledgement, whether it's a elbow bomb or whatever it may be, which framework do you think was applied in this situation by Kyra? Is it trauma-informed practice, or is it positive youth development, or is it mindfulness development? Go ahead and record your answer, and let's see if you're on the right track. You are indeed correct. It is positive youth development because here we see that care is being taken of the students, and a deliberate attempt is being made to develop caring rituals. And you can also see there an attempt to build a connection between Kyra and the students, but also between the students and their peers, as they are encouraged to learn each other's names and to also greet each other, whether with handshakes or with an elbow bump or even whatever other forms of acknowledgement as well. Let's go to our third and final scenario. And for this scenario, Kendra and Evan are working together on an art project. Kendra looks at the clock and she notices time is almost up. Evan reminds her of something their art teacher told them: having a time limit can make you even more creative. And so they decide to stay focused on creating the shapes and colors they want. So here we see again, different approach being made here. Do you think that mindfulness development was used in this scenario, or was it a positive youth development approach, or do we see trauma-informed practice here being used as the framework that was applied? Go ahead and share your response with us, or just make a note of your answer by looking critically yourself at the scenario. All right. And Here again, if you selected mindfulness development, you are correct, because here we see that Kendra, in fact, Evan reminds Kendra to not focus on everything that is happening around it, but instead to be present in the moment by creating shapes and colors that they want at that moment, rather than limiting their time at being creative by thinking about the clock and focusing on the clock, but focus on the work at hand. So if you were able to stick that one, thumbs up to you. You did exceptionally well. Thank you for participating in these three scenarios. And you may consider using these in your program, or adapting them essentially to find ways to see, where your students are, whether with a SEL competency or even just with the practices and the frameworks that we would have mentioned as part of setting up your social and emotional learning environment. So now we move to step 7, and this is where we talk about intentionally designing your activities. And when we talk about designing your activities, we use the students' needs identified, which we would have discussed earlier when we spoke about our needs assessment. And we would create our needs statement, and then we would then select our set of delivery strategies that we want to use, but also what interventions would be used as well. So are we going to be using, whether it is whatever activity types that we may want to use, or strategies we want to use, whether it's a blended approach, or are we going to be using a themed approach, are we going to be using project-based learning, whatever it is. But we decide on our delivery strategies or interventions and our activities that will engage our students while they are learning the identified skills. Now, if you want to support this work for your students the best way you can, it is ideal that you use the SEL strategies that are already being used in the school day. That's why we spoke about that earlier, that you establish that link with your school day leaders and school day staff, and that they support you in as part of your program team to identify your needs and develop your goals and also your activities as well. Now, we take all those three pieces and we put them together to create one narrative or one story. And so here we go with that story. We identify the student need, we determine the instructional strategies that we use, whether we're going to be explicit or we're going to embed them into existing activities. We choose our activity types, whether we're going to be using academic intervention, we're going to be taking a recreational approach, and we're going to be using family enrichment or engagement activities, or will you take a culture and career readiness approach, whatever approach you want to take based on your program and your needs and your resources. And then you then decide on the delivery methods and the approaches that you'll use to engage your students in your SEL activities. And that's the simple process that we encourage you to follow as you roll out or expand on your SEL program. Now, before you make any final decisions, you want to ask yourself some guiding questions. And those questions will include, recalling your program SMART goals. You want to look at your student level data to tell you about your students' needs. You want to determine what 2 or 3 skills or behaviors you want to focus on within your existing activities. But also, are you in a position to also focus on specific skills or behaviors uh, through SEL targeted activities? So being very explicit in your approach. But also, what about the student voice data that you'd have collected? What the students said they were interested in, and how can you use that as well to drive your programming? So do you have a situation where your students, for example, may say they're interested in yoga, or they're interested in art, or playing sports, or they're interested in comic books, or whatever it may be? You can use those as a driving force in developing your intentional design activities. So here we'll show all the components of ensuring that your activities are intentionally designed, and they are listed in the correct order as well. So we would go back to identifying our program SMART goal, or we'll pull that into our template, which we also provide for you for designing your activities intentionally. You identify your student level need, what instructional strategy you will use to respond to those needs, selecting from the activity types I mentioned before, whether it's family engagement, whether it's recreation, whether it's academic intervention, academic enrichment, looking at your delivery method as well. And then based on your method of delivery, you can then also be very specific as to what will be the activity SMART goals. So for each activity, what goal will be accomplished at the end of that activity. And that allows for you to create that intentional designed activity, which you can then use to drive your SCL programming. And the activity SMART goal, as well as intentional design activity, with all the other components mentioned before, will allow you to track and to monitor whether you are moving in the right direction to achieve your program SMART goal, which is at the top of that triangle or pyramid, essentially, in terms of where you want to go with SCL programming. Now, it's important that you consider that you consider the two types of instructional strategies that will help you to meet your SMART goal. So as you engage students in activities that they find interesting and enjoyable, you want to consider whether you're going to be using explicit strategies or you're going to be using embedded strategies. Now, what's the difference? Your explicit strategies are those that involve direct or explicit instruction that build knowledge and skills in SEL. And so these activities are used to help students meet academic goals, and they usually require a small student to teacher ratio. And they are particularly beneficial for students who you find require whether repeated instruction or they may require explicit instruction in order for them to master a particular skill. But you can also choose to deliver embedded or use embedded strategies, which involves activities that provide them to opportunities for them to practice the SEL skills or concepts within the context of another activity. And so it may be an enrichment type activity, whether it is art or music or drama or whatever it may be. But it may also be some of your routine activities like snack time or transition time, and you could allow students to practice whether self-management, social awareness or responsible decision making or just relationship building skills while they are engaged in these activities. And you will recognize that these enrichment type activities or even transition activities really will allow for you to zoom in on some of the students' interests and bring in some of their student voice and choice, but you're able to create these real life relevant learning experiences for them by embedding these approaches and embedding the SEL skills into existing activities as well. So here are examples of explicit and embedded activities. So first, we look at the explicit activity. And in this explicit activity example, once a week, the program offers a Know Yourself workshop. And in these workshops, activity leaders model self-regulation and teach students to name their feelings and to identify how their bodies respond to stress. The students also discuss and role play ways to manage their feelings and to express themselves. And they're also able to work together to come up with strategies for self-regulation, such as deep breathing or even taking a 10-second break. And that deep breath just now really did something amazing for me. So I hope you could probably take an opportunity to do some deep breathing yourself or just taking a 10-second break even between these sessions that you participate in this conference or other activities for the school year. And so this activity is very explicit because it is teach students to be self-aware and for them to identify how they feel and identify how their bodies respond to stress as well. So it's very, very direct instruction around that particular SEL competency of self-awareness. Let's look at our embedded activity. And in this activity, The program actually uses engineering design challenges such as building a race car that can safely carry an egg along a 20-foot track to teach physics, math, and engineering skills. But during these activities, activity leaders notice that some students become frustrated and give up when they encounter roadblocks. And so the leaders guide students through a problem solving process that incorporates self regulation strategies to get them back on track and to build their capacity to deal with frustrations so that so they can reach their goal. So this activity, as you can see, it's embedded. It's an existing activity that we could say is STEM related, building skills for students in the areas of math, engineering, but also physics as an area of science. At the same time, students are learning how to problem solve and also to regulate themselves, even as they come upon roadblocks or challenges. And how can they better deal with frustrations? Because as they develop those skills and competencies as part of their self-regulation, they will be able to reach their goal because they will come overcomers of those challenges. And so, if you recall earlier, I mentioned briefly the five skill domains in the presentation. It's important that we ensure that our students are able to know and identify these competencies, but also that we help them to build the competencies as well. And also that we provide them with opportunities to practice these competencies and these skills. And we do that by incorporating them into our explicit or embedded instructional activities or strategies. So before we jump any further into the session, I'd like for us to reflect here on an example of a program goal and also an activity goal, and we will be able to use these to review some activities later on in the session and to determine whether the activities are embedded or explicit. So let's look at our program goal firstly. And the program goal is that by the end of the program year, disciplinary referrals for students who participate in the 21st CCLC program for at least 60 days will decrease by 10% as measured by behavioral reports. And the specific activity has a goal that at the end of the program year, 75% of students identified as in need and who regularly participate in martial arts will report an increase in ability to recognize and control their emotions as measured by pre and post session student interviews. So having looked at you know that program goal and also that activity goal, I'd like for you to tell me which domain here would we be focusing on or addressing as part of these explicit or embedded activities. And of course, you can feel free to go ahead and to jot those down somewhere, or if the platform allows for you to chat, go ahead and to post that in the chat as well. So our first activity deals with actually martial arts and mixed sports. And in this activity, students engage in the practice of Taekwondo and other sports to achieve fitness and focus, while also utilizing self-discipline and socialization skills to positively, manage conflict and anger. So go ahead and tell us this activity that we've developed. Uh, which domain does it represent? Is it self-awareness? Is it self-management? Is it responsible decision making? Is it social awareness, or is it relationship building skills? And you are correct if you selected self-management, because here students are being taught to focus on utilizing self-discipline to manage themselves and to be able to manage conflict and also anger. And they're also doing that by being exposed to socialization skills, within the activities, whether it's Taekwondo or in other sports activities as well, which really are really focusing primarily on achieving fitness, But here we've embedded the social emotional learning components as well for students to develop the competencies that we require them to. And so we will, from that example, you will be able to see how you can go about intentionally designing your activities, whether taking an embedded or an explicit approach, but of course ensure that you are careful in integrating those competencies that we mentioned before: your social awareness, your self awareness, your self management, responsible decision making, and also relationship building skills as well. Now, you will also need to focus on recruiting and preparing high quality staff, which is step 8. And of course, you can decide whether you will use new or existing staff or partners to achieve your goal. But as you do that, consider, of course, their existing skills in building social emotional learning, and also if you need to build further capacity in them to whether to provide instruction in SEL, but also to practice or to support students over time in developing those skills. So you can either use in-person training or webinars, or even take some e-learning approaches, but also developing some job aids to help you with that as well. And of course, spending time assessing your staff and observing them to see what their needs are, and then you can build your professional learning plan and always come back to Y4Y for resources on how you can improve their capacity to develop and to, to implement SEL activities. That takes us to step 9, which is where we focus on implementing a continuous improvement plan. And of course, that begins with us defining your program. And this, of course, would occur after you have collected your data and your needs assessment statement. And then, of course, you complete the definition of your program when you write your program goal, design your activities, but also set your activity goals, and also identify the resources that you will need to carry out the activities. And of course, you can use a logic model to capture that information. Having defined of those components of your program, then you implement with fidelity by ensuring you're providing the required and the adequate dosage actually of activities for your students based on what you've outlined in your program plan or program logic model. And you also focus there on the delivery, to what extent are your students engaged, and how are staff adhering to those processes and activities. And so from there, you're able to collect data again on on the implementation activities and processes. You analyze that data and then determine what actions you need to take to improve your processes and activities. And then the cycle continues from there. And here we provide for you social emotional learning logic model template to track your work. That's also downloadable and can be customized from the Y4Y website. And I already reviewed this in terms of implementing with fidelity and ensure that there is adherence to your program plan, that there's adequate dosage. That's important because what happens many times is that as students transition from one activity to the next, if you said you'd have provided 1 hour of instruction in SEL 2 days per week, if transition time takes up 5 to 10 minutes, then they actually lose 10 minutes from that session that would have been planned for 1 hour. And so their dosage would have been decreased essentially. So you want to ensure that you build in transition and ensure that students get the adequate number of hours or minutes that would have been dedicated to a particular activity to build those skills for them. And from there, we get to celebrating our successes. It's important that we do. That we're living in very difficult times. We always have been, but more difficult times now. And so any success that you can identify from implementing SEL, you want to celebrate that. You want to celebrate your students, you want to celebrate your staff, you want to celebrate your families as you make and take steps towards, increasing the acquisition of those skills and competencies, and as they practice them as well and demonstrate them within your program environment or within the school environment or even at home or in the community as well. So make sure you take time to celebrate, have those Zoom parties, if anything, or Google Meet parties, whatever you want to do, but acknowledge the efforts of all those who are involved and whether they're making personal progress or personal growth. Take the time out to celebrate everyone who is involved in making your SEL programs and activities a success. And there we have it for you. We've covered all the 10 steps for implementing social emotional learning. And we hope that you're in a better position now to go and apply them at your programs and to see some improvement over time as you implement it with fidelity and as you apply all the steps and use the tools that we have provided for you. And speaking of tools to support your work, you can find all these tools and resources on the Y4Y website, y4y.ed.gov. That will include the implementation checklist that takes you through all the steps I just took you through in more detail. And you'll also find trainings to go, which are hour-long PowerPoint sessions that also provide you with handouts and supporting tools and resources that you can use to train your own staff in implementing SEL at your program. And you can also spend some time going through the full length course, which will take you anywhere about 5 to 7 hours or so, or 5 to 9 hours, as you do the introduction or the implementation strategies component of the course. So please go on the Y4Y website and go straight to learn or courses, and you can select this course and do it in its entirety and be able to implement it in your program as well. So for our next steps, we'd like for you to spend some time reviewing that course I just showed you and to also meet with your program team to assess how ready are you as an organization to implement social and emotional learning activities. And having completed that assessment, spend some time to put a plan in place to implement SEL in your programs or to expand if you're already doing some SEL activities. And we wish you all the best as you implement and continuously improve SEL within your other school time program. It was my pleasure being with you today. I hope that you are better equipped to go forward now and to make SEL a reality and a success in your program. Feel free to visit us, as I said, at y4y.ed.gov for more information. And of course, to email us at y4ywebinars@sciservices.com if you have any further questions. Have a good rest of the day. Take care.